When people think of Los Angeles, most picture sunny beaches, Hollywood blockbusters, and the glitter of celebrity life. But beneath this bustling city lies a story very few know. According to legend, hundreds of feet below Los Angeles, a vast network of winding tunnels is hidden. And inside those tunnels, it said, don't live humans, but a mysterious race of lizard people. These lizard beings were believed to possess intelligence far beyond that of humans. And over the centuries, they supposedly safeguarded enormous treasures of gold, along with ancient and mysterious texts. It all sounds like some wild urban legend. But here's the strange part. Back in 1934, this very story was reported as serious news in the local press. And it all begins with an engineer named Warren Shufelt. Shufelt wasn't famous, nor did he have an impressive academic background. The only highlight in his professional record was that he had once taken part in gold mining surveys in Arizona. But there was one thing that set him apart. Since 1927, Shufelt had become obsessed with the idea of finding an underground civilization. At the time, geological surveys relied on drills or manual digging, methods that were inefficient and often missed hidden underground spaces. Shufelt, however, couldn't stop thinking about how to develop a way to see beneath the earth quickly and clearly. He spent 6 years tinkering away in his garage until he finally came up with something he called a radio wave geological scanner. It looked like a half-man-tall iron box, topped with several copper antennas. Inside were batteries and a tangle of wires. At the bottom, it connected to a metal rod that was driven into the soil. Shufelt claimed the device emitted radio waves at different frequencies. When those waves passed through layers of soil and rock, they would bounce back depending on what they struck underground. The returning signals were then displayed on a dial with a pointer. According to him, if the pointer swung left, it meant there was a hollow space. If it swung right, it indicated metal. And if it spun in circles, it meant there were organic materials, like bones or even the remains of ancient structures. Nobody really knew whether Shufelt's device worked or not. In fact, some of his peers openly mocked him, saying he had just taken apart a radio, stuck a rod on it, and pretended it was high-tech equipment. But Shufelt never responded to their laughter. Then in the fall of 1933, Shufelt carried his scanner to a few spots near Oliver Street in downtown Los Angeles and began testing the ground. At first, the results were unremarkable. The dial pointer barely moved, indicating nothing more than regular soil and rock. But on the afternoon of October 15th, everything changed. Shufelt drove the metal rod into a patch of dirt near City Hall, and the pointer began to swing wildly, as if it was about to snap off the dial. Excited, Shufelt adjusted the frequencies and slowly traced the signals, mapping out the shapes underground. 3 weeks later, the map in his hands was covered in intricate lines. These lines revealed a network of underground passages stretching from beneath downtown Los Angeles, northwest toward the San Fernando Valley, and southeast toward Long Beach, over 60 miles in total. Even stranger, the layout wasn't random. There were exactly 7 main tunnels, with all the other smaller passages branching outward in a neat pattern from them. The main tunnels measured about 10 feet wide and 8 feet high, while the side passages stood around 6 feet tall. What's more, the reflected signals suggested that the tunnel walls weren't just bare dirt. They appeared to be reinforced with some kind of material. Looking over his maps, Shufelt became convinced. These tunnels weren't natural formations. This was a city, an ancient city buried deep underground. Not long after, Shufelt publicly announced his discovery of this vast subterranean network beneath downtown Los Angeles. At first, he only described it as a city underground. But soon, rumors began to spread that it wasn't just any city, it was the hidden treasure vault of the lizard people. And that twist didn't come out of thin air. It was linked to the real-life testimony of an elderly woman named Mrs. Evans. Evans was a descendant of the Chavira Indians. She was already in her 70s, living on a reservation outside Los Angeles. When she heard about Shufelt's discovery, she actually went to see him in person. In her hands, she carried a worn leather notebook. When she met Shufelt, she told him that this notebook had been passed down from her grandfather, and inside were the stories preserved by her tribe for generations. Shufelt took the notebook, opened it, and saw pages filled with strange symbols and writings he couldn't recognize. Evans leaned closer and began to explain what was written inside. According to the notebook, back when the Chavara Indians' ancestors lived on this land, they already knew that beneath Los Angeles lived a group of lizard people. They called themselves the Aka. These Aka stood about 6.5 feet tall, with green skin covered in tiny scales. Their fingers and toes ended in claws, and their eyes glowed in the dark, just like a cat's. Since they disliked sunlight, they lived in underground tunnels, surviving on water from subterranean rivers and on certain plants that grew underground. But the story gets even stranger. The notebook claimed that the Aka used a kind of glowing stone as their energy source. These stones were embedded in the walls of their tunnels, which meant that even in total darkness, the tunnels shined as bright as daylight. The Aka also carved their history into the tunnel walls, so those walls were covered in engravings. Some carvings were said to be star maps, mysterious symbols no one could understand. It seemed like those maps might have been tied to their belief system. Evans went on to tell Shufelt that when she was a little girl, her grandfather once took her to a cave near the San Fernando Valley. The entrance was hidden by vines, but after squeezing in and walking just a few dozen feet, they found a perfectly smooth tunnel. The walls felt like stone, but harder and tougher than any rock she had ever touched. She remembered faint glimmers of light along the walls. Curious, little Evans wanted to explore further, but her grandfather immediately pulled her back and warned her. The Aka don't like to be disturbed. The stories told by old Mrs. Evans had Shufelt so excited that he couldn't even sleep. In fact, during one of his later public talks, Shufelt declared, "Mrs. Evans' story matches my survey results perfectly. The tunnel network I mapped out is exactly the home of the Aka people. The size of those main tunnels would fit beings that stood around 6.5 feet tall, and the high-density objects I picked up in certain areas could very well be those glowing energy stones she described." The idea of a hidden underground city of lizard people spread like wildfire, and soon all of Los Angeles was buzzing. On January 13th, 1934, the Los Angeles Times ran a front-page story with the headline, "Engineer Claims Ancient Lizard City Lies Beneath Los Angeles. Plans to begin excavation in spring." The article even included Schufelt's hand-drawn tunnel maps and an artist's sketch of what the lizard people might look like. According to the report, Shufelt had already applied for an excavation permit from the city. His plan was to dig at the intersection of Oliver Street and 5th Street, what he called the head of the lizard city, where the most important relics and caches of gold were likely buried. Public opinion was split into two camps. Some people thought the whole thing was ridiculous, nothing more than a scam cooked up by Shufelt to swindle money. But just as many, if not more, believed him. After all, this was the Great Depression, and people were desperate for a miracle to hold on to. Soon, crowds began gathering at night around the empty lot where Shufelt planned to dig. People shined their flashlights into the ground, hoping to catch a glimpse of the glowing stones below. Local merchants jumped in too, selling Lizard Man souvenirs, keychains engraved with reptile designs, t-shirts printed with the tunnel maps, and even restaurants got in on the act, offering a so-called Lizard Man combo meal, which was basically just a burger smothered in green sauce. And it didn't stop there. A businessman named George White approached Shufelt, offering to invest in the excavation project, with one condition: any artifacts they dug up would have to be split between them. Shufelt gladly agreed. Together, the two recruited more than a dozen workers, forming an underground expedition team that was set to begin digging as soon as spring arrived and the weather warmed up. Everyone was waiting in anticipation, convinced Shufelt was about to uncover the remains of a lost underground city, or maybe even those mysterious, glowing stones that could change the future of Los Angeles forever. But what nobody realized was that this much-hyped adventure was about to vanish into a cloud of uncertainty. By March of 1934, the rains in Los Angeles had finally stopped, and the ground began to thaw. That's when Shufelt and his team set up fences at the intersection of Oliver Street and 5th Street, rolled out a small drilling rig, and officially began their excavation. At first, everything went smoothly. The drill went down about 15 feet, pulling up nothing but ordinary soil. At 30 feet, some chunks of rock started to appear. Shufelt looked at them and told the crew, "These are the rocks that make up the ceiling of the lizard people's tunnels." Then at around 50 feet, the workers suddenly shouted. They had hit something strange. It was a black object, about the size of a human palm. Its surface was covered in tiny scale-like patterns. It felt cold and solid, not like any stone or metal they had seen before. Shufelt grabbed it immediately, shined his flashlight across it, and noticed the edges were perfectly even, like it had been cut or carved by hand. Excited, he held it up for the reporters gathered around him and said, "This is it. This is from the ACA people. Look at the scale pattern. It's exactly the same as the drawings in Mrs. Evans' notebook." The reporters rushed forward, snapping photos. The very next day, that black scale stone made front-page news. The Los Angeles Examiner ran a bold headline, "Lizard Man Relics Unearthed. Black scale stone proves underground civilization exists." The media frenzy drew massive crowds. Within days, more than 1,000 people showed up at the dig site. The fences were packed with onlookers, some even climbing nearby rooftops just to get a glimpse of the mysterious stone. But then, things started to get strange. The day after the black scale stone was found, Shufelt's radio wave detector suddenly stopped working. Before, the device had clearly shown the underground structures. Now, no matter how he tuned the frequency, the needle didn't move at all, like something was interfering with it. Shufelt checked everything. The battery was full, the wires were intact, but the machine was dead. His conclusion? It must be the ACA. They don't want us digging any further, and that wasn't the only problem. Later that afternoon, the black scale stone disappeared. Shufelt had placed it inside his toolbox, locked in the temporary tent at the site. But when he opened it, the stone was gone. The tent door was still locked, the windows were intact, and workers had been nearby the whole time. No one could explain how it vanished. Shufelt even called the police, but after an investigation, they came up with nothing. The case was left unsolved. Then the drilling itself began to slow down. At about 65 feet deep, the drill suddenly hit something so hard it couldn't go any further. The crew swapped in sharper drill bits and tried again and again. The motor overheated, nearly burning out, but they barely managed to cut a few extra inches. When they finally pulled the bit back up, its tip had been ground completely flat, coated with a strange silver dust. Shufelt frowned and told the workers, "This isn't ordinary rock. This is some kind of metal, harder than steel." That's when George White, the businessman funding the project, suddenly announced he was pulling out. White told reporters, "I think Mr. Shufelt's judgment is flawed. There is no underground city here. We're wasting our time and money." And with that, he packed up his men and walked away from the site. Without financial backing, the excavation had to stop. Shufelt tried to find new investors, but the once enthusiastic businessmen were suddenly nowhere to be found. Some said they didn't want trouble. Others admitted they thought the whole thing was a scam. Even old Mrs. Evans showed up at the site. She looked at the stalled drill rig and warned Shufelt, "My grandfather once said, 'Those who disturb the ACA will be punished. Maybe it's time to stop.'" But Shufelt didn't listen. Instead of giving up, he poured his own money into the project, hiring 2 workers to keep digging. For another week, they pressed on. Then on April 10, 1934, Shufelt suddenly announced the excavation was over. No one knew why. In his official report to the city, he simply wrote, "The underground structure is too complex. Continued excavation poses safety risks. The project is suspended." When reporters pressed him, asking why he had quit, what happened to the black scale stone, and why his scanning device had suddenly failed, Shufelt only shook his head. He never answered another question. From that moment on, it was like he became a different man. He stopped giving interviews, stopped talking about lizard people or underground cities, and even burned the tunnel maps he had drawn. Some claimed he was threatened by mysterious strangers. Others whispered that he had uncovered something far more terrifying, but was too afraid to reveal it. And still others insisted it had all been a hoax, and when the money dried up, Shufelt simply couldn't keep the act going. By 1935, Shufelt had left Los Angeles altogether. He moved to Arizona and went back to his old line of work, gold prospecting. When he died in 1957, he never again spoke of what had happened back in 1933. Among his personal papers, the only traces of that story were a few blurry photographs of the black scale stone and a half-finished excavation report. But Shufelt's death didn't kill the legend. If anything, the story of the lizard people's underground city grew stronger, like a seed sprouting new twisted branches as time went on. In the 1960s, while Los Angeles was building its subway system, some workers claimed they stumbled upon something strange. According to a construction engineer's memoir, near Hollywood Boulevard, we dug into a tunnel about 10 feet wide. The walls were smooth like they had been polished, and they were covered in markings we couldn't understand. We wanted to explore further, but suddenly orders came down from above. Stop the dig, seal the tunnel with concrete. Nobody explained why. They just said, it's an order. To some, it all sounded absurd, but there were always people who believed. Even today, there are still treasure hunters, explorers, and conspiracy theorists searching beneath Los Angeles for traces of the lizard people. Some bring modern scanning equipment to the very site where Shufelt once dug. Others crawl into abandoned sewer lines, convinced they'll find the hidden tunnels. And many comb through old newspapers and archives, hoping to uncover the truth Shufelt took to his grave.